Helen, yes.
Can you remind us when our office hours are, when your office hours are? I don't think it's on the site.
Sure. So normally I have office hours Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 12 to 1:30. I won't have them today though. I've got a meeting that I've got to go to, but I'll be there on Wednesday. So did you have questions about the test?
About the paper, but that's all right.
Oh, okay. Well, we can definitely. Oh, that's right, because it's due Wednesday. Well, email me and let me know, and maybe we can figure something out tomorrow.
Sure, yeah.
So, yeah, apologies for that.
That's okay.
I wasn't thinking about that. Okay. Anybody else need anything? All right. Well, it's good to see you guys. I got to meet lots of parents. I met 22 sets of parents between 8:30 and 12:10 on Saturday morning. It was definitely insane, but it went well. So I was glad. I had nobody who was angry with me, so that was very good. People were all very nice. Okay, this is where we had left things on Friday. We were looking at this figure, I think a very, very important figure, St. Boniface. And if you remember, when we're talking about St. Boniface, we're really talking about the conversion of the barbarians. So he's very successful in converting the Germans. He's less successful in converting the French. And the only way that the French go along with conversion is if they're given titles of nobility from the old Roman Empire. So that's why, very importantly, Charlemagne, on Christmas Day of the year 800, will be crowned Holy Roman Emperor. And yet, notice what's happened there. This is a total fiction. Nobody has been emperor for over 300 years at that point. And they certainly would never have imagined that a Frankish barbarian would be the emperor of the Roman Empire. So there's a lot of fiction that's going on in this idea. But the agreement that Boniface makes is with Charles Martel. And that agreement is they'll give France all the holy titles, the royal titles of the Romans, but the French have to convert to Catholicism, and then also they have to stop the Muslims from moving further into Europe, which Martel does. He faithfully executes that agreement. And it's one of the great battles of European history is the Battle of Martel against the Muslims, where he soundly defeats them. And it's a major, major victory for the Christians at that point. Jake?
Did you say 1310? Is that a year?
No, in the year 800.
Oh.
When Charlemagne's crowned?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the year 800. So that we call that whole time period is called the Carolingian Renaissance. So anyway, this figure here, St. Boniface, is really the great diplomat of this period, of the medieval period, and making those alliances. And it is pretty amazing. I don't know, how to kind of reconcile this as a historian, but every time you look at Boniface, he makes a move, it's exactly counter to what Islam is doing, as Islam is encroaching upon Europe. So it's really Boniface who's the master architect of preventing Islam from taking over Europe at this point. But he, as I mentioned the other day, he takes his own kind of shtick too far, and he goes into a German village where he tries to challenge them with his axe again, and the Germans grab his axe and take his head off. So he's a martyr for the faith. And often if you've seen images of Boniface, I picked a kind of nice one, but often they'll show Boniface without his head, and his head is usually on the ground next to an axe in a lot of images that we have of him. But still, even though that's how he dies, he's an absolutely amazing figure. Okay, so there are a couple of things that I want to state about the Middle Ages overall that I think are really important to understand them. Some I've already mentioned to you, but others I haven't. So probably the most important thing to understand about the Middle Ages, and remember we're talking from roughly 476 up until about 1350, right, about the end of the Middle Ages. Usually we date it to the end of Dante and Dante's death, or right around the time that Dante writes the Divine Comedy, is the end of the Middle Age, the high point of the Middle Ages, but the end of it as well. So one thing to keep in mind about this, and I'll give you several, is that this is really the only time in history where you have an entire civilization devoted to the Christian faith. And so you've got every decision that's being made, and we may disagree, especially if you're coming from a Protestant perspective, you're going to disagree with many of the decisions that they make, but we could never take away from the medievals that they are doing everything possible to live out their Christian faith. And that's what they think is important. This world for them is merely a stepping stone to eternity. And so they know that every decision that they make here has momentous consequences. And so everything they build, everything they do, it's all based on this idea that we are only temporary pilgrims here and we're eternal citizens of the city of God. So that has to be first and foremost in our understanding about what the medievals are doing. The second thing, and again, I mentioned this to you the other day, but it's worth repeating. The second thing that matters is that almost everything structured in the Middle Ages is religious and not political. We don't look to the Middle Ages for their politics. We look to the Middle Ages for their spirituality and their culture and their architecture, but not their politics. Politics is almost always a secondary, if not a third level consideration for the medievals. And notice how radically different that is from us, where politics just swamps every aspect of our lives. And that just was not the case at all during the time period of the Middle Ages. And so what we're going to see, and I'm going to flash forward here a little bit, but what we find then is that, and here's a good map. It's post-medieval, unfortunately. I don't have a good map of the Middle Ages, but just look at how many, this is the 1440s, but look at how many entities there are and how many different kingdoms. So let's say, for example, that you're a really smart Hungarian student and the monks have been able to identify you and they're going to pay for you to go to the University of Oxford, one of the great institutions. So you're going to leave Buda or Pest and you're going to march all the way across Europe. And what do you find? Everywhere you go, you're crossing a barony or a duchy or a kingdom or someone pretending to be an emperor or a shire, but everything is different. And so notice here, I don't even think we could calculate if we left Hungary and went up to Oxford, how many different political entities, maybe 100, 150, that you would cross over all of this. So imagine a world in which a place like Hillsdale County would be a large patch of land to control. That's what the Middle Ages are like. And so the moment we have what are called nations, there is no longer the Middle Ages. If you have a nation, you're no longer in the Middle Ages at all. You're in the modern world if you have a nation. So that just didn't exist in the Middle Ages. So again, we have to think about it in this highly decentralized way. And that limits some of our thoughts because I think probably for many of us in this room, when we think of Middle Ages, we think of kings and we think of powerful kings. But kings were not powerful at all, with the exception of Charlemagne and Otto I. They're the only two kings who really matter in the Middle Ages. The popes matter. The kings do not matter overall. So again, just a very different way of thinking. John?
Were each of these like kingdoms and stuff that had like different currencies and different?
They would often, well, remember almost everything being traded is being traded on gold and silver.
Okay.
So basically they do have a kind of similar currency, but it would depend what kind of mint it is. But let's take your question a little bit farther, John. Let's say that you do go from either Buda or Pest all the way up to England, and you cross all of those places. They also all have their particular languages everywhere. But what could you speak? What does everybody speak?
English.
They all speak Latin, right? So there's a universal language that allows them to move through this and to be able to speak, even though they can't speak the local dialect or the local language. But they've got Latin, which holds all of them together. Jake?
Is that the same cores in Portugal as
It is, yeah. That's close to Spain too. What we have right there, if you combine those two kingdoms, you've got Spain as well. 1444, you can kind of see it here. That's still the remaining Islamic holdout at the bottom. And by 1492, they'll have kicked them out. They'll have run them out completely. But yeah, so you're starting to see here nation states, but not quite yet, but very, very close. Helen?
So would it be fair to say just like the the classical Greek city-states had a unified like language and religion, but debated fiercely over like political structure, that the Middle Ages also have these really small political organizations, but instead of debating politics, they're more obsessed with like nuances and differences of religion?
Yeah, I think that's a very good way of putting it. So it does resemble, I mean, ironically, they think of themselves as Romans, but they look much more like Greeks in what they're doing. However, and this is the third point I wanted to make about this, and it's related to the first two, but it's also related to your very good question, Helen, and that is this. So this is probably the only time in world history where people are actually satisfied with their condition. And let me explain what I mean by that. Remember when we look to the Greeks, they're always restless. Now, the Greeks are always looking for something else. They're a deeply, deeply restless people. Think about us. We are an incredibly restless people. Think about everything we do in terms of expansion. Think about our military as Americans. Think about our technology. Our new iPhones are always better than our old iPhones, which of course is ridiculous, but we buy into it. Every time Apple has one of its big open seminars, we're all excited about the new technology, which is just an incremental jump from the previous technology, but we have to get the new iPhone. We're restless. We're always looking for things. The Middle Ages is the only time that people are actually satisfied with the world because they know it's temporary. And so they're always thinking about eternity in what they're doing. So granted, that's very much related to the first 2 points, but keep that in mind as we're thinking about the Middle Ages. Okay, so we do have all of this. Let's go back to Boniface there for a second. And I want to explain, this will be my fourth thing I want to mention about the Middle Ages. And that is, when we look at the Middle Ages, there are 3 great institutions that define what the Middle Ages are. So the first institution, which I'm going to talk a lot about in just a moment, not quite yet, but in a moment, are the monasteries. Every single village in Europe has its own monastery. The monasteries are everywhere. And monasteries are very interesting architecturally because they're always closed. That is, you'll have huge high walls around the monastery, and then inside you'll have either all men or all women living together, depending whether they're monks and priests or they're nuns. But they'll all be living in same-sex communities. But every community has one of these. And they are all based on what Catholics call orders. And the orders are important, and the best way to think about them, especially given our modern day, is to think about them the way that Protestants think of denominations. So for a Protestant, you can be Methodist, or you can be Anglican, or you can be Baptist, or you can be Lutheran. Within the Catholic Church, you have orders that are similar to denominations. So I, for example, I'm just speaking as Brad for a moment, I belong partially to a group called Opus Dei. I don't do a lot with them, but I do some with them. I used to be really active. So, but my real loyalty is to my parish here, St. Anthony's. And so I would be what's called a secular. Secular just means you're not a part of any specific order. So Father David, who's the priest at St. Anthony's, he is regarded as a secular priest. because he doesn't belong to a specific order of Catholics. But if you look at Catholics, and hopefully you guys had a chance to read the Benedictine rule, when you look at that, the Benedictines are an order. And so you can have a great variety within the Catholic Church. And I'll just give you an example. Two orders that emerged at the same time are the Franciscans and the Dominicans. When the Franciscans arise, all based on St. Francis's teaching, when the Franciscans arise, they wear just brown robes, maybe sandals, maybe not, depending on if they're trying to do penance or not. But just sandals, just a brown robe with a rope or maybe a rosary that ties together the gown. And their mission is always to help the poor. That's what the Franciscans do. They go into the poorest, I'll get you in a second, Marion. They go into the poorest sides of Europe and they aid the poor. But at the same time, you see arise the Dominicans. The Dominicans their official title is called the Order of Preachers. And they only wear white everywhere they go. In fact, if you ever see a priest walking around dressed in white, it's almost certainly a Dominican. And their job was not to minister to the poor, but to minister to the wealthy. And so they go into the wealthiest areas of Europe and try and get them to convert to Christianity or maintain their Christianity. So notice what's happening here. They're both Catholic, but they're focused on on opposite things in what they're doing. Franciscans are all about aid. The Dominicans are about preaching. They are the great orators of the Catholic Church. Later, you'll have the Jesuits, and the Jesuits are the shock troops of the Catholic Church. They're originally founded to go directly against the Muslims, but they end up going against the Protestants after the Reformation. So they're the shock troops. And the Jesuits are pathetic now, but at one time they were superheroes. These guys are like X-Men in what they're doing. They were incredible at one point, but they're not anymore. But that's what we mean when we say an order in the Catholic Church. Right? Does that make sense for everyone? Okay, Miriam.
Off of that, I guess I'm kind of hung up on the analogy between orders and denominations.
Okay.
Because denominations have different doctrinal beliefs.
Yes.
Like they actually believe in different doctrines.
Right.
Whereas Catholic orders within the Catholic Church all believe the same thing.
Mm,
You're all
yeah.
Catholic.
Yes
There's just
and
different
no.
styles of spirituality.
Yeah, yes and no, Miriam. So, for example, if you talk to a Jesuit, they're going to be much more free will oriented. If you talk to an Augustinian, they're going to be very predestinarian. So it is possible to have diversity. There are certain things they have to agree upon, but within the church, there's pretty serious diversity from one order to another, mostly on the things they emphasize rather than what they believe.
Right, but they still believe all of the teachings of the Catholic Church.
They do.
Like the Catholic Church is united, is what I'm saying, I guess.
Yeah, yes, again, I would say yes and no. It's united about the most important things, but there are marginal things that it's divided upon. So there are things
Right,
that
but
they
the Catholic Church allows that division.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Right,
Right.
right. In that sense,
not
it's
a
very
split.
different.
The church is not split, is what I'm saying.
No, exactly. It's still one church.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's how you allow diversity within one church is what the orders do.
Yes.
It allows- Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
But it's all within the authority of the
Absolutely.
majesty.
Under the Pope.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. No question. They still, everybody still has to answer to the Pope overall. Yeah. John.
So where do the military, like when people talk about military orders, is that the same thing?
Yeah.
Hospitality?
Oh, yeah, like the
Knights
Templars.
and stuff?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's all part of it as well. And again, notice, those are not Franciscans, right? The military orders are not Franciscans. So Miriam, that's the difference, right? So you actually have orders that are based on warfare, orders that are based on peace.
Right.
So still all within the church.
Right.
But-
Which is different than denominations.
Yeah, maybe it's not a fair analogy. So, okay, I'll grant you that. It just strikes me as something similar at least from the outside viewpoint. But okay, good. So that's the first thing, the monastery. Monasteries everywhere. The second thing that we see in terms of institutions are the cathedrals. Cathedrals are also all throughout Europe, and we'll look at some pictures of them here in just a moment. But incredible. And what we see in terms of the cathedrals is that the cathedrals are always meant for you to look up beyond this world. So a cathedral is always built so that your eye goes from the horizon to the heavens. And again, it's an architectural reminder that we are only temporary in this earth, right? And so that's what the cathedral is. So imagine, you think about architecture for a moment, think about how things are designed. When you go into Walmart, do they want you to look up? No, absolutely not. Everything is at your level. And all the candy is at the level of your kids, right? Which is not unintentional at all. And you think about, you walk into a place like Walmart, and if you look up, it's really ugly. Right? The ceiling is really, really ugly. They don't want you looking up there. They want you looking at all the products as you go through. And so the whole basis of a grocery store or the basis of a shop is to keep your eyes at your level so that you're tempted by things. And the number one thing everybody always needs from a grocery store is milk. So where do they put the milk? The milk is always absolutely in the farthest spot from the door so that you see more stuff on the way to get it. And that's all intentional. And they play music to distract you, and they've got the TV monitors. And I'm not trying to knock Walmart. I just want you to see that's what they're going for. When you go to a cathedral, its whole purpose is to get you to think beyond this world. That's what the cathedral does. That's its architecture. And so it doesn't want you dwelling on the now. It wants you worried about eternity. John.
Would every single one of these cathedrals have had a bishop as well, or is this?
Actually, technically, if it is a cathedral, they would have had to have had a bishop. So probably a lot of them are basilicas. I'm using cathedral basically for any really large church that we see. So probably technically the cathedral would have to have a bishop. Yeah.
So basilica is, like, I guess I'm the one who's mixed up then. So basilica is big church without a bishop?
Yeah.
Okay, so like with St. Mary's in Jackson, you like an example?
I don't know. I'm not sure. Notre Dame's got a basilica. Sacred Heart, that's a basilica. So it's the seat of a cathedral without a bishop.
Okay.
Yeah. So a little bit different, but yeah. Okay. So the third institution that matters is the university. And you guys think about this. On that day that you all took the oath, all of us marched out. And what'd you guys notice about all of us when we marched out? Helen?
You have cool robes.
Yeah, and why? What do our robes make us look like? Don't think too much about it. Give me the first obvious answer.
Graduates.
Not graduates. Graduates look like the same. We're supposed to look like priests as we walk in. We're dressed like medieval priests. And even done to music, and think about what happens. They play a song, and then they start with a prayer, and then you have 3 speeches. You have 2 from a student and 1 from the president, and then you take an oath. This is like reading the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Gospel. It's all patterned after a Catholic Mass, despite the fact we're a Protestant school. It's all patterned after that. So that matters, in predominantly Protestant, that matters in, again, the way that we think about things. Now, think about this. Just think about our campus for a moment. What's distinctive? And it wouldn't just be our campus. Notre Dame's the same. Michigan's not quite the same anymore, but close. What do you notice about a campus? Yeah, Helen?
Is it like around a central building?
Yeah? How do I get to that central building?
have to walk.
Okay, anybody gonna stop me if I walk from here up to Central Hall? No, of course not. A campus is utterly open. It represents the universe. It's a university. It represents the universe. And so I have complete free access on this campus. Anybody in town can come walk on campus without being a member of this college. Now, could I go into a monastery without permission? Absolutely not. So think about at the beginning of the Middle Ages, you have high security. At the end of the Middle Ages, you have open communities. And it means that we're not as much under siege at the end of the Middle Ages as we are at the beginning of the Middle Ages. But, if any of you ever go to Yale, they've closed everything off now. It looks like a monastery rather than a university, because New Haven's an incredibly dangerous place. So, and the same thing with Chicago, being on the University of Chicago, being on the south side of Chicago. It's incredibly dangerous. So they've got fences and security everywhere. But that's difficult because the campus was originally laid out to be a campus, to be open. So that, and we're really blessed here at Hillsdale. I don't think we're going to have townies invade us, so we're okay. At least for the time being, we're okay. So yeah, okay. Does that make sense? So those are the institutions. Helen.
Does the word campus come? Isn't that the Latin word for like military?
I don't know.
establishment?
I don't know. That's a good question. Yeah, it might, but I don't know. Helen, it's good. Okay, so let's go back to the monastery for a bit. So as I said, the monastery is the ultimate institution of the early Middle Ages. And a monastery, and I hope you guys saw this by reading the Rule of Benedict, a monastery is a polis. This is what they're trying to recreate. It is a polis. It has the rules like a polis. It has the order of a polis. And if you live in a monastery, not only do you pray constantly, but you work constantly as well. And your labor is regarded as prayer. This, again, goes back to the Latin opus Dei, the work of God, what you're doing. So you're laboring, and it may mean that you're a beekeeper, it may mean that you're a gardener or a farmer, but the monks all have jobs besides just praying. But of course, the great difference between it and a polis is that the monasteries and the nunneries are all same-sex. And so think about what this is doing, and I hope this should be clear after everything we've talked about. The monastery, being a monk, is a way to be a martyr for Christ without actually dying. So to go into being a brother or a monk is your way of rejecting the world, of saying, I no longer have freedom in terms of profit or of sexuality or of will, but I've given it over to my community, and I've taken a vow of obedience, chastity, and poverty. So that's what's going on with these monks and with these nuns. And we could never imagine the Middle Ages without them as the economic engines of the Middle Ages as well. But here's what I want to talk about for just a moment. I want to talk about the Bible and where the Bible fits into all of this. And again, no matter what we are today, if we're Protestant or Catholic or Orthodox, we all owe a huge, huge amount of gratitude to the monks for what they did. So think about this, right? Let's just talk about the Bible for a moment. Remember, the New Testament doesn't come into being until, that is, it doesn't come into a coherent being until we get to St. Jerome. Right, so that means for the first 400 years of Christianity, there is no New Testament that we would recognize. And then right after the Bible is compiled, and almost everybody agrees that this is what it should be, then we have the sack of the barbarians, and they come in and they lay waste to Rome. And so we enter into a very dark period economically and culturally after the barbarian invasions. Well, this is what happens with the monastery. two names I want you to know. There's a fascinating hermit by the name of Saint Anthony of the Desert. And Saint Anthony's response to all the barbarian invasions is literally to walk around North Africa on his own, in which he is giving himself over to Christ. And the idea then develops from him into the East. Well, rather than have lots of individuals out walking around alone, why don't we put them in community? And so the Eastern Orthodox Church comes up with the idea of a monastery. That is, that you would have all of these hermits or wanderers, these kind of madmen, you would have them all in a community. And from that, in the West, and this is the second name I want you guys to know, in the West, there is a very devout Christian by the name of Benedict, Saint Benedict, who takes this idea from Saint Anthony of the Desert and from the East, and he builds the first Western monastery called Monte Cassino in Italy. So he builds the first monastery. Now, here's what matters about that for us as citizens of Western civilization. Remember, all of the Middle Ages are under attack, always, right? Until the very end of the Middle Ages, they're always under siege. It's Magyars or Vikings or Muslims, always constantly attacking Western Europe. And so they're always in defensive position. Well, what that means as well is that there's no real possibility of advancing culture or learning beyond a generation or two because you're always worried about being sacked. So what's the monastery do? The monastery preserves all the agricultural techniques of the past. It preserves all the technology that it can of the past. But most importantly, it preserves Scripture and it protects Scripture. And so you can imagine, and just think about how logical this would be. We could, if there were 100 monasteries, we could wipe out 99. And if one monastery remained, Western civilization remained. That may be all that's left is one monastery, but that's all you need for the entire contents of Western civilization. And so this is what I want to talk about for a moment, and I want to throw this out to you guys. One of the greatest advances technologically is the creation of a book. It's an incredible technological advancement. We all in this room take it absolutely for granted. Right now on my iPhone, all I would have to do is hit my Kindle app. And however many Kindle books, which is outrageous how many I have, way too many. But all of my Kindle books are right there. I could go to Project Gutenberg, and I could go to almost any classic text in the world. Right? We all have at our fingertips so much literature that we can all see instantly. In the Middle Ages, you don't have any of that. What you have are these dark, dank monasteries in which monks transcribe the Bible over and over and over again. So you always pick the person with the best handwriting among the monks. Makes sense. So let's say that I am a monk and I've got the best handwriting in my monastery, and I devote my life to transcribing the Bible, that is making new ones. Right? And again, there's no printing press yet. You guys realize that, not till the 1450s. So everything is handmade. So how many Bibles do you think I could get to in a lifetime? Yeah, that's a very good guess, Helen. Anywhere between 2 and 3 I could copy if I had a lifetime to do it. What do I copy it on? What's a book look like in, say, the year 600? Helen, go ahead.
It's made from vellum, which is made from sheepskin.
Okay.
Or something like that.
All right, let's imagine there's no paper, right? Paper is taking insectile waste. That's what paper is. Paper is a combination of wood pulp and insects that you mash together, you pulp together to make a piece of paper. There's no technology to do that yet. None. That doesn't exist. Now, you can't go into Walmart in the year 600 and get your 500 sheet ream of paper, right? Not possible. So everything is written on vellum, either on sheep or on cattle skin. Generally, sheep is better. So how many sheep have to die for one Bible, do you think? You guys know the Bible's a big book. Anyone? Helen?
In a ballpark, like 500.
Yeah, that's a very good guess. It's about 200. But think about that. You have to kill the sheep. So you're not using them for their wool because you're using them for their skin. If you use them for their wool, you can use them over and over and over again. If you do it for their skin, that's a one-time job. And you don't take the bad sheep because they don't have good quality skin. You take only the good sheep. You kill them, and once you've skinned them, you then have to stretch the skin out, each individual page, and you have to scrub it of all of its hairs. This is a very time-consuming process. And then once you've done that, what do you write with? Let's say that you've got all these pages. Frederick?
Natural inks and dyes.
Any ink and dye you can get. How many dyes grow naturally in areas like England?
Probably about 4.
Yeah, just a couple, right? Dyes always do well in hot, humid areas. They do not do well in Europe. So you take whatever dye you can and you transcribe the Bible. Well, are there going to be errors in the Bible? Of course. Is it something sinful on the part of the monk that they made an error? No, think about this. They're in a dark, dank room writing by candlelight. By candlelight, right? This is a world lit by fire. And they're transcribing this thing. And they're doing the best that they can. And they're going to make mistakes. It's unfortunate, but it's true. Well, how easy would it be for, say, me as just a faithful Christian? How easy would it be for me to own a Bible in the Middle Ages? Isaiah?
Almost impossible.
It would be 0. What do you do once you have a Bible? They're so hard to make. You take them and you put them in the cathedrals. And what do you do when you put them in the cathedrals? You bolt them to the desk because they're the most valuable thing in all of the Middle Ages. So you literally take bolts and you clamp them the best you can. You chain them down because what else is in them? Anybody want to take a guess? Now, let's look at these. These are English Bibles, very, very rare, with just a few dyes. Look what they do. Why would they do that? Why, wouldn't you think if you're trying to get as many Bibles done as possible, you just write things out as quickly as you can? John?
Well, probably for the same reason that they make beautiful architectures, the illuminated manuscripts and stuff, like make people remember what they're
Absolutely.
reading.
Can you imagine writing the Word of God only in black and white? That would be a crime for them. Of course, that's not what you do. You illuminate it. And what's the most precious thing you put in your Bible? Do you know, Frederick?
I was going to say one other thing. I know the answer to that, but one other thing I think it does too is for all the people who are illiterate, it gives them something that kind of crystallizes the most
Absolutely.
important elements of the scripture into a format they can understand.
Absolutely.
Most important thing though would be names of your family.
Okay.
Baptism dates, stuff
Okay,
like that.
yep. I was actually thinking of a material. What material do they put in this? Helen?
I also had a different answer.
Oh, that's okay.
Are there, well, just like the idea that if you're only gonna if one, hardworking monk is only gonna finish like max 3 Bibles in a lifetime, like there's not really this push for optimization. Like you might as well take your time and make them beautiful because it's not like rushing, you get way more done.
Right. Okay. Nope. That's very good. And I want to expand on something Frederick said, and this is so important for us. All of Catholicism and all of Eastern Orthodoxy are based on an illiterate population. So important. So when you go to St. Anthony's You've got statues of saints, you've got stained glass everywhere. They light the incense at every high mass. That's all because Catholicism develops when people are illiterate. It's very important to understand that. It's really important. Protestantism all develops when people are literate. And so, of course, it can focus on just the Bible. But you can't do that in Catholicism because Catholicism developed in a different culture. And so it has to be very visual, extremely, it has to be visceral. It has to be tangible in some way. So that, just keep that in mind. John?
You were saying that there's like the important like material in it?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
like probably like gold leaf.
Absolutely, that's what I was getting at. Any gold they have, they put it in their Bible. So let's just look at a couple of images here. So look at those covers. This is from Lindisfarne. This is on the extreme northeastern coast of England. Unfortunately, there's Lindisfarne today. It didn't make it. It got raided in 793 by the Vikings, and so it doesn't exist anymore. But we still have the remnants. So there's the Lindisfarne Gospel, right? Incredible. There are more images. Of course, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John each get their own images with the animals that represent them. But look at this. That's the reproduction of a letter in the Lindisfarne Gospels. Anybody want to take a guess how many dots there are in that? There are over 1,000 for one letter. Isn't that amazing? It's beautiful. It's so beautiful, so amazing. But of course, a Viking raids the monastery. What's the first thing they take?
The gold from the Bible.
The gold from the Bibles. These are the most sought after things in the Middle Ages by Christian and pagan alike. And so here's my point, guys, and I hope this is clear. We all owe so much to these monks for what they did. We would not have Bibles today without them. They preserved these things. They gave everything. Many of these monks gave their entire lives for 1 or 2 Bibles. That's incredible. And of course, we all take it for granted. I mean, all we have to do is walk over to the bookstore and buy a Bible. Right? So we just so take it for granted. All I have to do is look on my iPhone and there it is. But can you imagine a world in which maybe there were 5 Bibles within 100, 200 mile radius? Oh. What do you expect of that? Right? So that's my point. These guys are absolute heroes, and I love the monasteries and what they do. All right, how many monasteries are there? Well,
A bunch.
there are just 2 different orders, the Cluniacs and the Cistercians. And so we don't have Benedictines up there who would be the most prominent, nothing. But notice where the monasteries are. They are everywhere. And what's the job of the monastery? It is to preserve the West, but it is also to leaven the community. So, anybody know German? What's the name for a nurse in German? It's Krankenschwester, the sick sister. Why? Because they were always nuns. So they're named after sisters. Right? So these are the people, they take care of everybody in their communities. And so they're not isolated like we often think they are. They're working in the community and doing what they can. So I hope that you guys get my enthusiasm about this. I just want to share this and again, put this in perspective of everything that's going on here. And there's that great map, that incredible map that shows us how utterly diverse Europe is. Okay, well, I want to look at one other thing here. And I want to look at the cathedrals for a moment. So our second institution that we've talked about. Now, remember, there are very, very few materials technologically in the Middle Ages. Look at these cathedrals. Let's just go through them for a moment. Of course, what do you do with your eye? We've already talked about that. You go straight up when you look at the cathedral. Look at the detail on that. Detail's extraordinary. I'm honestly not sure if we could build something like this today. I'm skeptical. I think our chapel is gorgeous, but to do the kind of stonework that it would take for this, and one of the funniest things, if you guys ever go over to Notre Dame, by the way, has got the best library in the region. No library comes even close to Notre Dame's library. It's 14 floors, open stacks. It's incredible. So if you ever have to do research, it's where you want to go, and it's only an hour and a half from here. But Notre Dame's campus is mostly neo-Gothic. And it's great because when you walk around, there are hidden Gothic figures in almost all of the buildings. So, for example, you'll see a Gothic structure, and it'll have Jesus, and it'll have Mary, and it'll have the 12 apostles. But snuck in the middle of it is Newt Rockne, the old football coach. And he's actually, there's an image of him where he's peering through the marble and looking at everybody. And that's Notre Dame. And the same thing is true here. These stoneworkers had fun in what they were doing. They didn't just create images of saints and angels, but they put all kinds of little figures in it, gargoyles, other things that they decorate with. And notice what we find here. Look at that for a moment. What's missing from this cathedral? What do you notice about it? I mean, obviously our eye looks up, but yeah, Frederick?
The biggest thing that jumps out to me, this is probably not exactly what you're looking for, but where is the town around it? Because when the cathedral was constructed, it would have had a whole village, a marketplace surrounding it. Now it just seems like it's sterile apartment buildings.
Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe I just picked a bad image too, and maybe that's all developed later. So I'm not sure, but that's a good question, Frederick. John?
Wouldn't there normally be like a steeple, like a big point?
Okay, yeah. Well, how about Sam?
I don't see a cross anywhere, I don't think.
Okay, there would be, it is up there. It's in the back, but it's hard to see on top. But that's a very good observation. And there are crosses on top of each of the doors, too, if you look carefully. There are crosses there, 3, in fact, which would be obviously representative for cavalry. Calvary, thank you. But yeah, Jake?
It's really asymmetrical.
Yes, thank you. It's totally asymmetrical. There's no symmetry to this. And that's Gothic. That's what we mean by Gothic. Gothic also has to do with the way it's lit, but it has to do with the fact that it's not symmetrical. What's that supposed to represent? Why would it be asymmetrical? Jake?
Because this world's imperfect.
Yeah, absolutely. This world's imperfect. And so that's what Gothic means in particular. We see the light within it, but it's not perfect. There, most famously, is Notre Dame. And again, you can see how beautiful it is, what it's meant to do. These are architectural miracles in every way. We could not easily construct these today. And then look inside. The lighting is incredible. Even though when we think of Gothic, we think of dark, we really should be thinking of light because of the way they constructed this. This is beautiful. And I think that we could have a question. I think we could legitimately say, was it worth spending all that money on something like this? But it was for them, because let's just think about this. Let's just take this one right here. How long would it take to build this? John?
There's some that will take like several generations, but
Yeah.
it gives work to everyone there.
Yeah.
Too, so it's like a benefit.
It usually, the average time for a cathedral is about 200 years. And imagine, most people only live to say 45. So that means that when I start a cathedral in my community, it will be my great, 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 great grandchildren who enjoy it. This is a long-term project. And I'll end with this today because I think it's a stunning little fact. When we look at a cathedral, and let's just take France for one area, we'll just take France. France quarried more stone between the year 1100 and 1300 than all of Egypt in its 3,100 years of its empire. That's incredible. These are our pyramids. but they're Christian. So it makes them very, very different. All right, thank you guys. Just make sure you've read the 2 law documents, and that's what we'll talk about on Wednesday, and then hopefully we'll have some time for discussion and study for the exam too. All right, thank you guys.
Sorry, what'd you say for the reading assignments?
Just make sure you've read Justinian and Alfred's The Laws.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That was really good.
Thank you.